The moment Officer Travis Cole pulled the trigger, he thought the story was already over. But what he did not know was that the sound did not stop in that parking lot. It traveled all the way to Washington. It was 5:42 on a gray Tuesday evening in Fairmont, Virginia, the kind of small American town where flags hung from courthouse windows. Pickup trucks rolled slowly past red lights. And people liked to believe the rules were the same for everyone. Outside the county administration building, under a row of flickering lamps, a black man in a charcoal coat stood with both hands visible, his voice calm enough to make the silence around him feel even heavier. His name was Marcus Ellison, though Officer Cole had not bothered to ask. To Travis Cole, he was just a tall black man standing near a restricted entrance, holding a sealed envelope, driving a plain dark SUV with government plates that looked too important for someone Travis had already decided did not belong there. "Sir," Marcus said, his palms open, his shoulders square, his breath steady in the cold air. "I am not reaching for anything." Those words should have slowed everything down. They should have made the officer think. They should have mattered. But prejudice has a way of making a man deaf to the truth when the truth is spoken by someone he has already judged. The parking lot had gone quiet. A woman, near the steps, clutched her purse to her chest. Not because Marcus had threatened anyone, but because Travis's voice had turned the air dangerous. A teenage boy in a hoodie held up his phone from behind a parked sedan. An older veteran wearing a faded army cap took one step forward, then froze when Travis barked at everyone to stay back. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He did not run. There was something almost impossible about his stillness. The kind of stillness that does not come from fear, but from years of discipline. His eyes stayed locked on the officer's face. Not with anger, not with panic, but with a kind of exhausted understanding, as if this was not the first time a uniform had mistaken his skin for a warning sign. The sealed envelope slipped slightly under his arm, its corner showing a blue federal stamp. Travis saw it, but he did not read it. He saw Marcus's coat, Marcus's hands, Marcus's calm, and somehow that calm offended him more than resistance would have. "Don't move," Travis shouted. Though Marcus had not moved at all, a gust of wind pushed a dry leaf across the asphalt. Somewhere beyond the lot, a church bell rang once, soft and distant. Marcus inhaled slowly. "Officer, listen carefully," he said. Each word measured, controlled, almost gentle. "You are making a mistake that will reach far beyond this street." A few people heard it. One man lowered his phone for half a second, confused by the authority in Marcus's voice. The older veteran's face changed first. His eyes narrowed, then widened, as if he was trying to place a name from a memory buried under years of service and silence. But Travis only smirked, his jaw tight, his badge catching the weak light on his chest. "You people always have a story," he said, and the words landed harder than the cold. Marcus did not flinch. That was what everyone would remember later. Not the shouting, not the confusion, not even the sudden sound that cracked through the parking lot and made every person there stop breathing. They would remember that Marcus Ellison stood like a soldier until the last possible second. Hands open, voice steady, dignity untouched. Then he went down to one knee, not with drama, not with a scream, but with a controlled heaviness, as if even in pain his body still remembered command. The envelope fell beside him and slid across the pavement until it stopped near Travis Cole's boot. For the first time, the officer looked down. The stamp was clear now. Department of Defense. Restricted review. Pentagon liaison office. Travis's expression flickered. Just for a moment. But he buried it quickly beneath the same hard mask he had worn for years. The mask that had gotten him through complaints, hearings, witness statements, and quiet conversations with supervisors who always found a way to protect their own. Everybody back up. He shouted. He made a move, but nobody moved. Because everybody had seen the truth. The teenage boy's phone was still recording. The courthouse camera above the entrance had turned silently toward the lot, and across the street, the older veteran's trembling hand had already pulled out his cell phone. His name was Daniel Brooks, former Army sergeant, 2 tours overseas, and he knew exactly who he had just seen fall under those parking lot lights. Marcus Ellison was not a suspect. He was not a drifter. He was not the threat Travis Cole wanted the world to believe he was. He was Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison of the United States Army, a decorated officer trusted with matters most men in that town would never be cleared to read. Daniel stared at the man on the ground, then at the envelope near the officer's boot, and his throat tightened with a fear deeper than shock. Not fear of Travis. Fear of what Travis had just awakened. He pressed the call button with shaking fingers and whispered into the phone. "This is Sergeant Daniel Brooks. Retired. I need an emergency military contact right now. A local officer just harmed Lieutenant Colonel Ellison." On the other end, the voice changed. The question stopped being routine. Daniel looked up as Travis continued shouting commands no one believed anymore. And in that cold Virginia parking lot, with red and blue lights flashing against the courthouse walls, the first shadow of Washington began moving toward Fairmont. Daniel Brooks had heard many kinds of silence in his life. The silence before a convoy moved through an empty road. The silence inside a hospital waiting room. The silence that followed, a name spoken with too much fear. But the silence in that parking lot felt different because it was not empty. It was full of witnesses who suddenly understood that what they had seen could not be unseen. Officer Travis Cole kept shouting, telling people to step back, telling them to stop recording, telling them that the man on the pavement had forced his hand. But his words were already losing their shape in the cold air. They sounded less like orders now and more like a man trying to build a wall out of noise. Marcus Ellison remained still near the edge of the courthouse steps, his coat dark against the pale concrete, his hand resting a few inches from the sealed envelope he had tried to protect. His eyes were open, focused, and even through the pain that tightened his jaw, he did not look defeated. He looked like a man listening for something only he knew was coming. A young paramedic named Rachel Monroe pushed through the gathering crowd with a medical bag in one hand and a radio clipped to her shoulder. She dropped to one knee beside Marcus, speaking gently, carefully, professionally, and Marcus answered her with short, steady words. His voice was quiet. but it carried discipline. He gave his name. He gave his rank. He gave one instruction that made Rachel pause. Secure the envelope. He said, "Do not let him touch it." Rachel looked toward the pavement, where the corner of the envelope still showed the Department of Defense seal under the shadow of Travis Cole's boot. She understood enough to know she did not understand everything. Travis heard Marcus speak and stepped closer, his face hardening. "That is evidence now." He snapped, "Nobody touches it except me." Marcus turned his eyes toward him, and for 1 second the whole lot seemed to lean into that look. There was no hatred in it. That almost made it worse. Hatred would have given Travis something to fight. Marcus gave him only truth. "You are contaminating a federal document," Marcus said. The words were not loud, but they changed the temperature of the scene. Daniel Brooks stood near a police cruiser, phone pressed to his ear, watching everything with a sickness growing in his chest. The person on the other end had transferred him twice, and now a calm military operator was asking for confirmation. Daniel gave the location, the time, the officer's name from the badge, and Marcus's full rank. When the operator asked if Lieutenant Colonel Ellison was conscious, Daniel swallowed hard and looked across the lot at the man who had once stood before a room full of young soldiers and told them that panic was a luxury they could not afford. "Yes," Daniel said. "He is conscious. He is speaking. He is telling them to secure a Defense Department file." The line went quiet for half a second. The kind of quiet that means someone has stopped typing and started understanding. Then the operator said, "Stay available. Do not interfere. Preserve any recordings." Daniel did not need to be told twice. He turned to the teenage boy with the phone and said softly, "Keep that video safe. Do not send it to anyone yet. Back it up if you can." The boy nodded, eyes wide. Suddenly aware that he was holding something larger than a viral clip, Travis saw them whispering and pointed toward Daniel. "You step away from the scene." Daniel raised one hand slowly, phone still in the other. "Officer, I am retired, United States Army. I am only reporting what I witnessed." Travis laughed once. Sharp and ugly. "Everybody is Army today." "Huh." The insult drifted across the lot, and Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. Not from weakness, but from a kind of tired recognition. Rachel kept working, her voice calm as she asked Marcus to stay with her. The courthouse lights buzzed overhead. Wind moved through the flags by the entrance. A siren approached from 2 blocks away, and with it came more local officers. Men Travis knew. Men who stepped out of their vehicles already looking at him before they looked at Marcus. That was the first sign of the cover beginning. Not a spoken plan. Not a secret meeting. Just glances. Tiny decisions. A supervisor named Lieutenant Harris arrived with a notebook in his hand and concern painted carefully across his face. He asked Travis what happened, and Travis answered too fast. He refused commands. He reached down. I believed he had a weapon. Marcus opened his eyes. "That is false." Lieutenant Harris did not look at him. He looked at the envelope, then at the cameras, then at the crowd. For the first time, fear passed through the faces of the men in uniform. Not fear of Marcus. Not fear of danger. but fear of documentation. Rachel saw it. Danielle saw it. Even the woman on the courthouse steps saw it as she clutched her coat and whispered. He had his hands up. Travis turned on her instantly. Mum, do not make statements you cannot support. Her chin trembled, but she did not look away. I can support it, she said. I watched it happen. And then another voice spoke. The teenage boy, my phone watched it too. That was when Travis stopped shouting. Just for a breath. Just long enough for everyone to hear the distant ring of Daniel's phone as a new call came through. He answered, and a woman's voice, controlled and official, filled his ear. Sergeant Brooks, this is Colonel Rebecca Hayes, with the Army Inspector General Office. I need you to listen carefully. Federal personnel are being notified. Local authorities are not to take possession of that document. Do you understand me? Daniel looked at Travis Cole. At the boot, near the envelope. At Marcus Ellison, lying beneath the courthouse lights, with his dignity still somehow intact. And he said, Yes, Colonel, I understand. 6 hours earlier, long before the parking lot filled with flashing lights and frightened witnesses, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison had left Fort Belvoir before sunrise with a paper cup of black coffee in the console and a sealed envelope resting on the passenger seat like a weight no one else could see. The morning was cold enough to frost the edges of his windshield, and the highway toward Fairmont stretched ahead in a pale blue haze. Quiet, except for the low rhythm of tires against asphalt. Marcus drove alone, because the assignment required discretion. No uniform, no escort, no marked military vehicle, just a man in a charcoal coat, a federal identification card in his wallet, and a file that had passed through more locked doors than most people would ever stand before. To anyone at a gas station or traffic light, he looked ordinary. Maybe a businessman. Maybe a father heading to work. Maybe someone carrying the kind of tired dignity that comes from sleeping too little and thinking too much. But Marcus Ellison had spent 22 years learning how dangerous ordinary could be when the wrong person decided you did not belong. At 43 years old, he had served in places where the horizon burned orange at dawn, and where every decision could echo through the lives of soldiers who trusted him. He had been praised in rooms with polished floors and forgotten in rooms where men mistook his calm for permission to disrespect him. The medals in his office meant less to him than the names written in a small notebook he kept locked in his desk. Names of soldiers who came home. Names of soldiers who did not. Names of people who taught him that command was not about being obeyed, but about carrying the consequences of every order. That morning, though, his mind was not on ceremonies or battlefields. It was on Fairmont. He had not planned to return there with federal documents in his car. Fairmont was not just a dot on a Virginia map. It was the town where his mother had worked double shifts at St. Agnes Medical Center, where she walked home in white nursing shoes even after 12 hours on her feet, where she taught him to hold his head high before the world gave him a reason to lower it. It was also the town where, at 16, Marcus had been stopped 3 times in one summer for walking through neighborhoods where other boys rode bikes without being questioned. He remembered the old courthouse steps. He remembered the diner that served him last, even when he arrived first. He remembered his mother squeezing his shoulder and saying, "Do not let their fear become your identity." That sentence had followed him farther than any road sign. Before the hearing, Marcus turned off Main Street and drove toward Fairmont Memorial Cemetery, where the grass still held silver dew and the American flags near the veterans' sections snapped softly in the wind. His mother was buried beneath a maple tree, not far from a line of old headstones worn smooth by weather. He stood there for nearly 20 minutes, hands in his coat pockets, the sealed envelope locked inside the vehicle behind him. He told her, as he always did, only the truth. I came back to finish something, he said quietly. No one answered but the wind. He did not say that the file contained evidence tied to private security contracts, missing complaints, and a pattern of local police incidents that had been buried under procedural language and friendly signatures. He did not say that names inside the packet could shake careers from Fairmont to Washington. He did not say that one of those names belonged to Officer Travis Cole, a man Marcus had never met but had already read about in statements that sounded too familiar to ignore. He simply stood beside his mother and breathed. Because even soldiers need one sacred place where they are not a rank, not a witness, not a symbol, just a son. By late morning, Marcus was back on the road, moving through the town with the same steady attention he brought to everything. Fairmont looked cleaner than he remembered. But not kinder. New coffee shops had replaced old storefronts. The courthouse had been repainted. The flags were newer, yet the eyes felt the same. At a stoplight near Broad Avenue, a patrol cruiser pulled up beside him, and Marcus felt the brief turn of a gaze before the light changed. He did not react. He had trained himself long ago not to feed suspicion with nervousness. 5 blocks away, Officer Travis Cole sat behind the wheel of that cruiser, chewing mint gum and watching Marcus's dark SUV turn toward the county administration building. Travis had already had a bad morning, though men like him often called it bad when they were merely inconvenienced. A teenager had questioned his tone outside a convenience store. A clerk had asked for a badge number after a rough traffic stop complaint. His lieutenant had reminded him that Internal Affairs wanted another statement on an old case. By noon, Travis was looking for control, the way some men look for coffee. Then he saw Marcus, calm, clean, composed, stepping out of a vehicle with government plates and carrying a sealed envelope as if the building had been expecting him. Something in that image irritated Travis before a single word was spoken. It was not evidence. It was not training. It was instinct, poisoned by bias and protected by years of getting away with it. Marcus checked his watch. The hearing was scheduled for 6:15 that evening in a restricted conference room behind the courthouse annex. He had time to review the file, make one secure call, and walk the final 200 feet across the parking lot. He did not know Travis Cole had circled the block once, then twice. He did not know the officer had already typed the license plate into his computer and frowned when the system returned government registration without details. He did not know that the man watching him had mistaken confidentiality for suspicion and composure for arrogance. Marcus only knew that the envelope under his arm mattered, that the truth inside it had waited long enough, and that by sunset, someone in Fairmont would finally have to answer for what had been hidden by 3 o'clock that afternoon. Fairmont had settled into the slow rhythm of a government town pretending nothing was wrong. Clerks carried folders between county offices. Attorneys crossed the square with leather bags swinging at their sides. A school bus sighed at the corner of Broad Avenue and Mercer Street, releasing children into the sharp autumn air. Marcus Ellison sat inside a small coffee shop across from the courthouse annex, untouched tea cooling beside his right hand. The sealed envelope resting flat on the table in front of him. He had chosen the corner seat because it gave him a clear view of the entrance, the sidewalk, the parking lot, and the reflection in the front window behind him. It was not paranoia. It was habit. A soldier learns that awareness is not fear. Awareness is respect for consequences. Every few minutes, Marcus glanced at his watch. Then, at the courthouse doors, the hearing was still hours away. But the weight of the file made time feel heavier. Inside that envelope were sworn statements from families who had been dismissed, body camera records that had gone missing and then strangely reappeared, contract emails routed through private accounts, and a pattern of complaints connected to a small circle of officers protected by men who preferred silence over accountability. Marcus had read every page twice. He knew the names. He knew the dates. He knew which signatures had been placed where they should not have been. But what stayed with him most were not the official details. It was the handwriting of ordinary people who had tried to report the truth and had been treated like inconvenience. A mother describing her son coming home, afraid after a traffic stop. A veteran explaining how his service card had been mocked. A cashier saying she watched officers laugh after a man was wrongly accused outside her store. Most of the statements were not dramatic. That was what made them devastating. They sounded tired. They sounded like people who had learned not to expect anyone powerful to listen. Marcus closed the folder beneath the envelope and looked through the window at the courthouse. For years, buildings like that had presented themselves as neutral, with stone columns, polished floors, and flags moving gently above the entrance. But Marcus knew a building was only as just as the people allowed to act inside it. He had seen beautiful rooms hide ugly decisions. He had seen clean uniforms carry rotten habits. He had seen men, quote, procedure while burying truth beneath it. Across the street, Officer Travis Cole's cruiser rolled slowly past the coffee shop for the second time. Marcus noticed it in the window reflection before he saw it directly. The vehicle did not stop. It only drifted by, slow enough for the driver to look inside. Marcus kept his expression calm, lifted his cup, and took a small sip. The tea had gone lukewarm. Travis Cole did not know that Marcus had already seen him once near Broad Avenue. He did not know Marcus had clocked the cruiser number. The posture behind the wheel, the way the driver stared a little too long before pretending not to. But Travis knew what he wanted to believe. From inside the cruiser, he watched Marcus sitting in that coffee shop like he belonged there. Coat neatly buttoned, shoes polished, face unriadable. That composure irritated him. Men like Travis often mistook calm for defiance because they needed fear to feel powerful. He parked half a block away and looked at the information on his computer screen again. The vehicle registration had returned enough to bother him and not enough to satisfy him. Government classification, restricted details. No local record attached. To a trained officer that should have signaled caution to Travis. It felt like a challenge. His jaw tightened as he thought about the complaint waiting on his lieutenant's desk. The one from a young black college student who claimed Travis had detained him without cause outside a gas station. The department would handle it. Like always. But lately things had become annoying. People recorded everything. People asked questions. People used words like bias and accountability as if they understood what it meant to wear a badge. Travis told himself he was tired of being judged. The truth was simpler. He hated being watched. At 4:15, Marcus left the coffee shop and walked 2 blocks to St. Agnes Medical Center, the hospital where his mother had worked for nearly 30 years. The building had changed, with glass doors and a modern sign. But near the old employee entrance, there was still a narrow bench under a sycamore tree. Marcus stood there for a moment, remembering her sitting in that exact place with her lunch bag on her lap, waving at him after school, smiling, like exhaustion had no right to touch her. She had believed in service before Marcus ever wore a uniform, not the kind of service that demanded applause, but the kind that showed up when people were hurting and did the work anyway. That was why the file mattered. Not because it carried the seal of the Department of Defense, not because it could bring down powerful men. It mattered because every hidden wrong taught someone vulnerable that justice was only for people with connections. Marcus looked back toward the courthouse square as the afternoon light began to fade. The hearing would begin soon. He crossed the street with the envelope tucked securely under his arm. Behind him, a cruiser engine started. Travis Cole pulled away from the curb and followed at a distance, convinced he was hunting a lie, unaware that he was trailing the one man in Fairmont carrying the truth. At 5:18, the light over Fairmont began to turn the color of old brass. Thin and tired, stretching long shadows across the courthouse square as Marcus Ellison walked toward the annex with the sealed envelope tucked under his arm. He did not hurry. Men who carry truth do not need to run toward it. His steps were even, measured, quiet against the sidewalk, passing a row of parked cars, a newspaper box with peeling paint, and a flagpole where the American flag moved in slow waves above the county seal. Behind him, the patrol cruiser rolled closer, then slowed, then stopped near the curb with the deliberate patience of someone who had already decided how the next few minutes would unfold. Marcus heard the engine before he turned. He had been aware of it for several blocks. The same cruiser, the same rhythm, the same distance that was not quite coincidence. He stopped near the edge of the parking lot and looked toward the annex entrance. Only 200 feet away. That was how close he was to delivering the file. 200 feet from a locked conference room. 200 feet from federal counsel. 200 feet from names being spoken aloud in a place where they could not be buried again. The cruiser door opened. Officer Travis Cole stepped out with his shoulders squared and one hand resting near his belt. Not because there was danger, but because he wanted the scene to begin with, everyone understanding who held visible power. His boots struck the pavement in slow, heavy steps. Marcus turned fully, calm enough that it seemed to irritate the officer, before either man said a word. "You?" Travis called out. "Hold up." Marcus stopped. He adjusted the envelope under his arm, making sure the seal remained covered from the wind, then kept both hands visible. "Good evening." "Officer," he said. "Is there a problem?" Travis came closer, eyes moving from Marcus's face to his coat, to the envelope, to the government plates on the SUV across the lot, then back again. "That is what I am trying to figure out." His voice, had the casual sharpness of a man who had practiced sounding reasonable while being anything but. "You have been hanging around county property for hours." Marcus did not react to the accusation. "I have business inside the annex." "What kind of business? Federal business?" Travis gave a small laugh through his nose. Short and dismissive. "Federal business." He repeated the words, like they tasted ridiculous. You expect me to believe that Marcus reached slowly toward the inside pocket of his coat, stopping before his hand moved too far. "I can show identification." "Slow." Travis snapped. Marcus paused, then withdrew his wallet with careful precision. The way a man moves when he knows suddenness can be misread by someone looking for an excuse. He opened it and held out his military identification card. Travis took it, barely glanced at it, then looked at Marcus again with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Lieutenant-colonel," he said, as though reading a child's costume label. "That is a new one." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed low. "That card can be verified through proper channels. Anyone can print a card." "Not that one." "Do not get smart with me." The first few people nearby had begun to notice. A courthouse clerk paused on the steps with a folder against her chest. A teenager leaned against a parked sedan and looked over his phone. An older man in a faded army cap, Daniel Brooks, had just crossed from the bus stop and slowed when he heard the rank. Marcus noticed him only briefly, enough to register the cab. The posture, the way veterans recognize tension before civilians name it. Travis stepped closer and flicked the edge of the identification card with his thumb. "So what is in the envelope?" Marcus held the packet a little tighter. "Restricted material." "Restricted from who?" "From unauthorized handling." Travis's eyes hardened. "You people love big words when you are trying to hide something." The sentence landed in the air like a stain. The clerk on the steps looked down. The teenager lifted his phone a little higher. Daniel Brooks stopped walking entirely. Marcus inhaled once. Slow and controlled. And for the first time, his eyes sharpened. Not angry. Not afraid. Sharpened. "Officer Cole." Marcus said, reading the name on the badge. "I have answered you respectfully. I have provided identification. I am scheduled to appear inside that building. I am asking you now to contact your supervisor or federal liaison before this goes any further." Travis tilted his head. "You are asking me, yes. That is your problem." Travis stepped into his space. Voice lower now, but more dangerous because of it. "You think a nice coat and a fake title mean you can stroll around here like the rules do not touch you?" Marcus did not move back. "The rules are exactly why I am here." For half a second, something flickered across Travis's face. Not understanding. Recognition without admission. He had heard enough complaints. Enough rumors. Enough whispers about outside investigators sniffing around Fairmont to know that the wrong envelope in the wrong hands could become a fire. But pride is a terrible advisor. And prejudice is worse. He tossed the identification card toward Marcus's chest. Not hard enough to injure, but careless enough to humiliate. It dropped against Marcus's coat and fell near his shoe. A few people gasped softly. Marcus looked down at the card. Then back up. Imagine standing there. knowing every instinct in your body wants to pick up what belongs to you, knowing every lesson your mother taught you says dignity is not the same as silence, knowing the man in front of you is not just challenging your identity but trying to erase it in public. Marcus did not bend yet. He let the moment breathe. Let the witnesses see. Let the camera capture his hands, empty and still. You need to step aside, he said. Travis smiled then. Fully, because he thought the calm was cracking. No, he said. You need to understand something. Around here, I decide who steps where. The wind moved between them. The envelope shifted under Marcus's arm. The courthouse clock above the annex clicked toward 5:25. And somewhere inside that building, people were waiting for a file that Fairmont had spent years hoping would never arrive. The first thing Marcus Ellison did was not defend himself. He looked at the ground, at the military identification card lying near his polished shoe, then lifted his eyes back to Officer Travis Cole, with the controlled patience of a man who understood that every movement was being judged before it was made. The card had landed face up, close enough for the gold lettering to catch the fading light. But Travis had already decided not to see it. Around them, the small crowd had grown by instinct, the way people gather when they sense something wrong and hope their presence might make it less dangerous. The courthouse clerk remained on the steps, one hand pressed against the folder she carried. The teenager behind the sedan kept recording, his phone held low enough to seem cautious, but high enough to capture everything. Daniel Brooks stood near the crosswalk, faded army cap pulled low, his eyes fixed on Marcus with a recognition that had not yet found the courage to speak. Travis noticed the phones first. Men like him always noticed witnesses after they had already created something worth witnessing. Put those phones away, he barked, turning his head just enough to scatter fear without taking his eyes off Marcus. No one moved at first. Then the clerk lowered her gaze. A man near the newspaper box slipped his phone into his coat. The teenager hesitated, and Travis pointed at him. I said, "Put it away." Marcus spoke before the boy could answer. They have a right to record in a public space. The sentence was calm, légal, simple. That made it dangerous to Travis. His face tightened, and his voice dropped into something colder. You do not tell me what rights people have. Marcus held his hands open at his sides. I am not trying to escalate this. Then stop talking. A long second passed. The flag above the county seal cracked softly in the wind. Somewhere inside the annex, a door opened and closed, releasing a faint echo into the parking lot. Marcus could see the entrance from where he stood. 200 feet, maybe less. He could almost imagine the conference room beyond it. The federal counsel checking the clock. The empty chair reserved for him. The secure line waiting for confirmation that the file had arrived. Every minute mattered. But Marcus knew that rushing would only feed Travis's story. So he waited. He let the silence reveal what the shouting tried to hide. Travis stepped closer. Close enough now that the smell of mint garment coffee came with his breath. What is really in that envelope? He asked. I have already answered that. Answer again. Restricted material for a federal review. A review of what Marcus said nothing, not because he was afraid, but because the answer was standing in front of him, wearing a badge. Travis smiled at the silence, as if he had won something. That is what I thought. He looked toward the others and raised his voice. "We have a suspicious individual refusing to explain why he is carrying sealed documents onto county property." The courthouse clerk finally lifted her head. "He showed identification," she said softly. Travis turned toward her so quickly she took half a step back. "Ma'am, I suggest you let officers handle police business." Daniel Brooks moved one step closer, his boots scraping the pavement. "Officer," he said, steady but careful. "With respect." That identification looked military. Travis laughed without humor. "With respect, nobody asked you." Daniel's face tightened. He had been spoken to like that before by men who saw grey in his beard but not service in his spine. Still, he did not push. His eyes returned to Marcus. And something clicked into place. The posture, the voice, the stillness. Years earlier, on a base in North Carolina, Daniel had heard a major named Ellison give a briefing after a training accident. Not with panic, not with blame, but with a quiet authority that made every soldier in the room sit straighter. This man was older now, with more lines around the eyes, but the presence was the same. Daniel whispered under his breath, "Lieutenant Colonel." Travis caught the words. "What did you say?" Daniel paused. Marcus gave the smallest shake of his head. "Almost invisible." Not because he wanted to hide, but because he did not want another black man dragged into a confrontation that was already poisoned. Travis saw the exchange and misunderstood it completely. To him, it looked like conspiracy. To him, two black men making eye contact became a threat. Apilan, a challenge to his control. His hand moved toward his radio. "I am requesting backup at the county annex parking lot," he said. "Possible fraudulent federal credentials. Subject refusing full cooperation." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "That statement is inaccurate." Travis looked back at him. "You want to correct my report now? I want you to make a truthful one." The words landed clean and sharp. No insult. No raised voice. Just truth. And truth was the one thing Travis had not prepared for. He reached down and picked up Marcus's identification card, turning it between two fingers as though it was something cheap. "You know what I think," he said. "I think you walked into the wrong town with the wrong attitude and thought nobody would question you." Marcus's voice lowered. "I was born in this town. For the first time." Travis blinked. The answer did not fit the picture he had built. Marcus continued. "My mother worked at St. Agnes for 29 years. I walked these streets before you wore that badge." The clerk on the steps looked at him differently now, as if the story had suddenly grown roots beneath the pavement. Travis hated that shift. He felt it. The crowd leaning away from his version and toward Marcus's reality. So he did what insecure power always does when it feels itself slipping. He tightened his grip. He stepped closer. He made the moment smaller and more dangerous. "Turn around," he ordered. Marcus remained still. "For what reason?" "'Cause I said so." "That is not a lawful explanation." The air changed. Everyone felt it. The teenager's hand trembled around the phone. Daniel Brooks stopped breathing for a second. Marcus did not move. And yet, he did not resist. He simply stood there with the dignity of someone refusing to participate in his own erasure. Travis leaned in, voice low enough that only Marcus and the nearest witnesses could hear. Around here, men like you learn when to stop acting important. Marcus looked at him, really looked at him, and the sadness in his eyes was deeper than anger. Officer Cole, he said, I have stood before generals, grieving parents, and soldiers who were afraid they would not make it home. I am telling you now, with every chance I can give you, stop before your pride writes a check your badge cannot cash. For one breath. Nobody moved. Then Travis's radio crackled. Backup answering his call. The courthouse clock clicked toward 5:30. The envelope pressed against Marcus's side like a sealed storm. And the man trying to stop him had no idea that the storm already had his name inside it. The backup cruiser arrived at 5:32. Rolling into the parking lot with its lights flashing but no siren. Washing the courthouse walls in red and blue as if the building itself had begun to pulse. Officer Travis Cole straightened when he saw it. Because backup did something to men like him. It made them louder. It made them braver in the worst way. It turned uncertainty into performance. 2 officers stepped out. One older and broad-shouldered named Mason Pike. The other younger, nervous, and still learning how quickly a uniform could become a shield for the wrong kind of pride. Travis did not wait for questions. He pointed at Marcus like the story had already been written. Subject is carrying questionable federal paperwork, presenting suspicious identification, refusing lawful commands, and interfering with county security. Marcus stood beneath the fading light with his hands still visible, the sealed envelope under his arm. His military identification now in Travis's possession. He looked at the arriving officers and spoke evenly. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison, United States Army. I am scheduled for a federal review in the annex at 6:15. I have provided identification, and I am requesting that a federal liaison be contacted before anyone handles the document I am carrying. The younger officer looked briefly at Travis, then at Marcus, then at the identification card in Travis's hand. There was a small hesitation there. A human hesitation. The kind that arrives before fear teaches a person to ignore it. Travis saw it and cut it off. Do not let the act fool you. He said, he has been coached. Daniel Brooks took a careful breath from near the crosswalk. Officer, that is a real military identification card. Travis turned on him again. You are still here. Daniel lifted both hands, palms out. But his voice did not shake this time. I am here because I know rank when I hear it. And I know discipline when I see it. Mason Pike stepped closer to Daniel. Not aggressive, but heavy with warning. Sir, we need you to move back. Daniel obeyed by 2 steps. But he did not leave. Neither did the clerk. Neither did the teenager with the phone. That was the thing Travis had not counted on. He knew how to intimidate one person. He knew how to bend a report. He knew how to speak with enough certainty that supervisors heard what they wanted to hear. But a circle of witnesses was different. A circle had memory. A circle had angles. A circle could hold the truth in more than one pair of hands. Marcus looked toward the annex doors again. The hearing was less than 45 minutes away now. Inside his coat pocket, his secure phone vibrated once, then stopped. Someone was looking for him. Someone in that building had noticed his absence. He did not reach for it. He did not even glance down. He knew Travis was watching for any excuse to turn a simple motion into a headline written by fear. "Officer Cole," Marcus said, "my phone is vibrating. I will not reach for it. You may contact the number listed on my credentials and confirm my assignment." Travis held up the identification card and smirked. "You mean this little card?" The disrespect was quiet, almost casual, and that made it more humiliating. Marcus's eyes hardened just enough for Daniel to see the soldier beneath the citizen. "That card represents the government you claim to serve." Marcus said, "No." Travis answered, "This badge represents the law right here." The words hung between them. Small and dangerous. Marcus tilted his head slightly, as though he was studying a man who had confused authority with ownership. "The law does not shrink to fit your ego." A breath moved through the crowd. Not loud, not dramatic, just a shift. The kind of shift that tells a bully the room has heard him lose. Travis felt it like heat against his skin. His face tightened. "Turn around." He ordered again. Marcus remained still. "Am I being detained?" "Yes." "For what specific offense?" "Suspicion." Suspicion of what? Travis stepped forward, voice rising. "Suspicion that you are not who you say you are." Marcus looked at the identification card, then at the envelope, then at the young officer, whose eyes kept drifting toward the Department of Defense seal peeking from under Marcus's arm. "There are proper ways to verify identity," Marcus said. "You have chosen none of them." The young officer finally spoke. Quiet, but audible. "Maybe we should call it in." Travis turned slowly. The look he gave him was not the look of a partner considering advice. It was the look of a man warning another man not to embarrass him. "I have control of my scene." Marcus heard that phrase. My scene. And something inside him settled into a colder clarity. He had heard commanders use similar words when they forgot that leadership was stewardship, not possession. He had watched careers collapse because a man could not admit he was wrong soon enough to save himself. Marcus lowered his voice. "This is not your scene anymore. You just do not know it yet." Travis moved close enough that the space between them became thin. "Is that a threat?" "No." Marcus said, "It is a timeline." Daniel Brooks felt the hair rise along his arms. The courthouse clerk slowly lifted her phone again. Across the lot, the teenager adjusted his angle. Somewhere on the wall above the annex entrance, a small black camera blinked in silence, recording without emotion, without bias, without fear. Travis did not see that camera. He saw only Marcus's calm. And he hated it because calm refused to bow. The envelope shifted as another gust of wind crossed the parking lot, and one corner lifted just enough for the federal stamp to show clearly. Mason Pike saw it. The young officer saw it. Daniel saw it. For the first time. Travis saw it too. Really saw it. But pride pushed understanding away. "Hand me the envelope," he said. Marcus's answer came immediately. "No." The word was not shouted. It did not need to be. It was the cleanest sound in the parking lot. Travis's eyes narrowed. "You are refusing a direct order." Marcus stood taller. Not by much, but enough that the difference could be felt. I am refusing unauthorized access to restricted federal material. The wind died. The flags went still. For one suspended second, Fairmont seemed to hold its breath. Then Travis reached toward the envelope. And every camera in the parking lot kept watching. Travis Cole reached for the envelope as if the act itself could make it ordinary. As if a restricted federal file became local property the moment his fingers moved toward it. Marcus Ellison shifted only enough to keep the packet against his side. His hands still visible. His posture still controlled. But that small refusal seemed to strike Travis harder than any insult could have. "Do not touch it," Marcus said. "You have not been cleared to handle that material." The words were precise, and precision made them sound heavier. Officer Mason Pike glanced at the young officer beside him, then at the blue stamp visible on the envelope, and for the first time since arriving, he looked less certain about the shape of the story Travis had given them. The younger officer swallowed and said, "Cole, maybe we should wait for a supervisor." Travis did not even look at him. "I am the one handling this." Daniel Brooks, standing several yards away with his hands open, felt his chest tighten. He had seen bad decisions gather momentum before. They rarely looked like explosions at first. They looked like pride, taking one more step than wisdom allowed. Marcus kept his eyes on Travis. "Officer Cole, listen to me carefully. That document is connected to an active federal review. If you seize it, damage it, or interfere with its chain of custody, you will create consequences far outside this department." Travis smiled, but the smile had lost confidence. "You keep saying federal like it is supposed to scare me. It is supposed to warn you." A few feet away, the courthouse clerk whispered into her phone, giving the dispatcher the location and telling them that an officer was trying to take government documents from a man who had shown military identification. The teenager near the sedan kept recording. Though his hands trembled so badly, the image shook. Daniel noticed and stepped closer to him. Not touching him, just standing near enough to make the boy feel less alone. "Keep it steady," Daniel said softly. "Truth does not need perfect hands." Travis heard the murmur and turned sharply. "I told everyone to stop recording." Marcus spoke again, and his voice cut through the lot with quiet authority. "You cannot order away witnesses because their presence makes you uncomfortable." That was the sentence that changed Travis's face. Not because it was loud, because it was accurate. His jaw flexed. His eyes narrowed. His breathing quickened, just enough for Marcus to see it. Years of command had taught Marcus how to read men under pressure. Some became clearer. Some became smaller. Travis was becoming smaller by the second, shrinking into the only thing he trusted, control. He stepped forward and reached again. This time, the envelope slipped from under Marcus's arm and dropped onto the pavement between them. It landed flat, the seal facing up. The words, "Department of Defense," clearly visible beneath the courthouse lights. No one spoke. The wind moved across the parking lot, lifting one corner of the envelope, making the paper tremble like it was alive. Marcus looked down at it, then back at Travis. "Do not step on that file." Travis looked at the envelope, then at the crowd, then at Marcus, and because every eye was on him, because backing down now felt to him like losing, he placed one boot near the edge of the packet, close enough to threaten it, not yet pressing down. It was a childish gesture, dressed up as authority, and everyone there understood it. The young officer's expression changed into something like shame. Mason Pike muttered, "Cole." Travis ignored him. "Pick up your identification," he said to Marcus. "Then turn around." Marcus did not bend. "My identification is on the ground because you threw it there. Pick it up. Return it properly." The silence after that was almost unbearable. Imagine standing there with your name, your service, your rank, and your mother's hometown all being weighed by a man who had decided your dignity was negotiable. Imagine knowing that the file at your feet could expose years of hidden harm, while the officer blocking your path was one of the names inside it. Marcus felt the old anger rise in him. Not wild, not reckless, but deep and ancient. The kind of anger passed from father to son, mother to child, citizen to soldier. Every time respect had to be requested from someone unworthy of giving it. But discipline was not weakness. Discipline was the locked door between pain and regret. He lowered his voice. "Officer Cole, the hearing begins in less than 40 minutes. People are waiting inside that building. If I do not arrive, calls will be made." Travis leaned in. "Let them call." Marcus held his gaze. "They already have." The words landed softly, but Travis heard them. His eyes moved. Just once. Toward Daniel Brooks. Daniel did not look away. He had not yet placed the call that would bring Colonel Rebecca Hayes into the story. Not in this part of the evening. But he was close. Very close. He had one hand near his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, and a memory rising clearer in his mind. Major Ellison standing before soldiers years ago, telling them that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the refusal to let fear choose your duty. Now Daniel knew his duty. Travis saw the movement and snapped. "Do not touch that phone." Daniel froze. Marcus turned his head slightly. "Sergeant," he said, quietly enough that only Daniel and the nearest witnesses heard it. "If this continues, preserve the record." Daniel's eyes widened. "Sergeant." Marcus had recognized the posture, the cap, the service in him. One word restored Daniel to himself. Travis caught only part of it. "What did you just tell him?" Marcus faced him again. "I told him the truth matters." Something in Travis broke loose then. Not in action yet, but in decision. He reached down toward the envelope, and Marcus took one careful step forward. Not to challenge him, not to threaten him, only to protect what belonged to the review. The cameras saw the empty hands. The witnesses saw the space between them. The courthouse camera above the door saw everything from a clean angle. But Travis saw only a story he wanted to tell before anyone else could tell the real one. His hand moved to his radio. "Subject is advancing," he said, voice tight. Marcus stopped immediately. "That is false." The young officer looked at Marcus, then at Travis, then at the blinking camera above the annex entrance. His face paled. For the first time, he understood that the truth was no longer trapped in human courage. It was being recorded by glass, metal, and memory. And still Travis kept going. Because some men would rather walk into ruin than admit they were wrong in public. The radio call had barely left Travis Cole's mouth when the parking lot seemed to narrow around Marcus Ellison. Compressing every sound into separate pieces, the buzz of the courthouse lights, the click of the teenager's phone adjusting focus, the small intake of breath from the clerk on the steps, the low static from Mason Pike's shoulder radio, the flag rope tapping softly against the pole. Marcus stopped exactly where he stood. He did not lift his hands higher because they were already visible. He did not step back because sudden movement could be twisted. He did not speak for one full second because he had learned, in harder places than Fairmont, that silence could sometimes keep a foolish man from becoming a dangerous one. But Travis did not want silence. He wanted submission. He wanted a version of the moment where Marcus looked afraid enough to make Travis feel right. "You heard me," Travis said, voice tight. "Do not move." Marcus's eyes moved once to the envelope on the ground, then back to Travis. "I am not moving. You took a step. To prevent unauthorized handling of restricted material, you advanced on me. That is false." The young officer shifted his weight, visibly uncomfortable now. "Cole," he said quietly. "The camera is right there." He nodded toward the annex entrance. For the first time, Travis looked up and saw the small black dome mounted above the door, angled directly toward the lot. His expression changed so quickly, most people missed it. Marcus did not. There it was. Not guilt, calculation. Travis turned slightly, giving the camera his profile, then raised his voice so it would sound firm on any recording. "Subject has ignored repeated commands and is attempting to interfere with an active investigation." Marcus looked at him with a sadness that felt older than the town itself. "You are building the report out loud before the incident is over." Daniel Brooks felt those words land in his chest. The teenager's phone kept recording. The clerk whispered, "Oh my God." Not because anything had happened yet, but because she understood that something was being manufactured right in front of them. Mason Pike stepped forward at last. Everyone just slow down. It was the first useful thing anyone in uniform had said. But it came too late to reach the part of Travis that still knew how to listen. The envelope trembled again in the wind. Sliding half an inch across the pavement, Marcus's identification card lay a few feet away. The face of it still visible, still ignored. Inside the annex, behind tinted glass, a security guard had noticed the gathering and reached for the phone at his desk. The hearing team upstairs had begun asking where Lieutenant Colonel Ellison was. A federal attorney named Naomi Price checked her watch for the third time and frowned at the empty chair across from her. But outside, all of that was still invisible. Outside, it was just a man. A badge. Un filet. And a circle of people who did not yet know how history would describe what they were watching. Travis's hand hovered near his sidearm. Not drawn. Not raised. Just there as a message. Marcus saw it. Daniel saw it. Mason Pike saw it too. And his face tightened. "Cole," Mason said. "Lower. Now. Do not make this worse." Travis snapped back. "I have control." Marcus answered before Mason could. "No. You have attention. Those are not the same thing." Another breath moved through the crowd. The line was not loud, but it was the kind of truth that makes weak authority feel exposed. Travis's eyes locked onto Marcus, with something raw beneath the anger. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus stayed calm. "I will comply with a lawful detention after you state a lawful reason and preserve the federal document without touching it. You do not set conditions. I am protecting chain of custody. You are obstructing. I am standing still." Every answer Marcus gave was plain. Every answer made Travis smaller. That was the tragedy of it. A man with real confidence could have stopped there. A real officer could have verified the card, called a supervisor, stepped back from the edge of his own pride. But Travis had spent too many years mistaking apology for weakness and too many years being rewarded for certainty, even when certainty was just prejudice wearing a uniform. The wind lifted the envelope again, and this time it flipped slightly, exposing more of the seal and a line of printed text beneath it. "Army Inspector General Liaison Review." The younger officer read it. His lips parted. "That is real," he whispered. Travis heard him and turned. "What did you say?" The young officer did not repeat it. He did not have to. The doubt was already there, visible in his face. And doubt was contagious. Mason Pike looked at the envelope again. Then at Marcus. Daniel Brooks took out his phone slowly. No sudden movement. His thumb hovering over the emergency contact he had been trying to remember. Travis saw the phone and barked, "I told you not to touch that." Daniel froze. But he did not put it away. Marcus turned his head just enough to speak to him without breaking posture. "Sergeant Brooks, preserve the record." This time, Travis heard every word. "You are giving orders now." Marcus faced him again. "I am asking a witness to protect evidence. I said turn around, and I said contact the proper authority." The courthouse clock struck 5:42. The sound rolled over the square. Slow and hollow. One came, two, three. Each note seemed to pull the moment tighter. Travis moved first, stepping toward the envelope as though he meant to seize it and end the argument by force of possession. Marcus shifted 1 foot forward. Careful. Open-handed. His voice sharper than before, but still controlled. "Do not touch that file." Travis flinched at the command. Not because Marcus threatened him, but because Marcus sounded like someone used to being obeyed for the right reasons. In Travis's mind, that tone became defiance. In his fear, defiance became danger. His hand moved. The crowd reacted before understanding. Marcus raised his palms higher and said, "Clear enough for every recording to catch it. I am not reaching for a weapon." Then the sudden sound split the air. People cried out. The teenager stumbled backward, but kept the phone up. The clerk covered her mouth. Daniel Brooks shouted Marcus's name before he knew he was going to say it. Marcus went down slowly, controlled, even as the world tilted. One knee touching the pavement beneath the courthouse lights. The envelope slid away from him and stopped near Travis Cole's boot. Its seal bright under the red and blue reflection of the cruisers. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even Travis looked stunned by what his own fear had chosen. Then training. Prix de, and panic rushed back into him all at once. He made a move. Travis shouted, Everybody back up. He made a move, but the sentence sounded hollow the moment it left his mouth. Because the cameras had seen the hands. The witnesses had heard the warning. And the truth was lying on the ground between them, with the seal of the Department of Defense facing the sky. For one impossible second after Marcus Ellison touched the pavement, the entire parking lot seemed to forget how to breathe. The red and blue lights kept flashing against the courthouse walls. But everything else froze around the lie. Officer Travis Cole was already trying to force into the air. He made a move. Travis shouted again. Louder this time. As if volume could rewrite memory. Everybody back up. He made a move. But Marcus's hands were still open. The teenager's phone had captured that. The courthouse camera had captured that. The clerk on the steps had seen it with her own eyes. And Daniel Brooks had heard Marcus say the words, "No innocent man should ever have to say while standing still in front of a badge." Rachel Monroe, the paramedic who had been parked less than a block away on a routine medical call, reached the scene first, with her bag in hand, and no patience for confusion. She moved past the officers and dropped beside Marcus. Her voice clear, calm, and urgent, without being frantic. "Sit. Stay with me. Tell me your name." Marcus opened his eyes. His breathing controlled through pain, and answered like he was reporting to command. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison, United States Army." Rachel paused, only for half a heartbeat. She had treated veterans before. She knew the difference between panic and discipline. "All right. Lieutenant Colonel, I am Rachel. I am going to help you." Marcus turned his eyes toward the envelope, now lying near Travis Cole's boot. "Secure the file," he said. Rachel looked over, saw the Department of Defense seal, and then looked at Travis. "That needs to be moved away from the scene." Travis snapped. "It is evidence, then stop standing over it," she said, sharper than she meant to. But the words were already out. Mason Pike stepped between Travis and the envelope, not touching it, just blocking the careless boot that had hovered too close. The younger officer stared at Marcus as if the world had shifted under him. Until that moment, rank had been a claim. Now it sounded like fact. Travis saw the doubt spreading and tried to crush it before it reached a shape. "No one touches anything until my supervisor gets here," he said, "and I want every phone collected." The clerk, still shaking on the steps, lifted her chin. "You cannot take my phone." Travis glared at her. "Ma'am, this is an active investigation. Then investigate what happened," she whispered. And her voice, though small, seemed to travel farther than his shouting. Daniel Brooks had already stepped away from the center of the crowd. Not running, not hiding, but moving with the focus of a soldier given a task. His phone was in his hand. His thumb trembled once before he forced it steady. He dialed the emergency military contact line he had kept buried in an old note from his veterans assistance paperwork, never imagining he would use it in a courthouse parking lot in his hometown. When the operator answered, Daniel spoke fast but clearly. "This is Sergeant Daniel Brooks. Retired, United States Army. I am in Fairmont, Virginia, outside the county annex. A local police officer has just harmed Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison. He is conscious. There is a Department of Defense restricted file on the ground, and local officers are attempting to control the scene. The operator started with routine questions. Daniel gave the time, the street, the officer's badge name, the visible seal on the envelope, and the fact that multiple recordings existed. As he spoke, his eyes stayed on Marcus, who was answering Rachel's questions with clipped, steady responses. Even now, Marcus did not plead for himself. He kept returning to the file. Do not let it disappear. Marcus said, do not let them separate the witnesses. Rachel looked up at Mason Pike. You heard him? Mason swallowed. I heard him. Travis turned toward Mason with disbelief. You are taking instructions from him now. Mason did not answer right away. That silence was its own answer. Across the lot, Lieutenant Harris arrived in an unmarked sedan. Stepping out with a notebook already in hand and the careful expression of a man who knew bad news before hearing it, Travis hurried to him, speaking quickly, trying to place the frame before anyone else could. He refused commands. He advanced on me. I believed there was a threat. The document may be fake. The identification looked suspicious. Lieutenant Harris glanced toward Marcus, then toward the envelope, then toward the phones pointed at the scene. His face tightened in a way that was not concern for Marcus, but concern for the department. Who recorded? He asked quietly. Travis looked toward the crowd. Several of them. The answer landed like a problem he could not solve. Daniel's cool transferred once, then again. And when a new voice came on the line, everything about it was different. Female. Controlled. No wasted breath. Sergeant Brooks. This is Colonel Rebecca Hayes with the Army Inspector General Office. Confirm the officer's name. Daniel straightened instinctively. Though she could not see him, Officer Travis Cole, Fairmont Police Department. Confirm the condition of Lieutenant Colonel Ellison. Daniel looked at Marcus, who was still awake, still composed, still watching the envelope as if duty had not released him. He is conscious and receiving medical aid. Confirm the document. Department of Defense seal, visible, restricted review. Pentagon liaison office. Local officer is near it. There was a silence on the line, and Daniel could almost hear a room in Washington changing shape. Papers stopping. Chairs moving. People understanding. Then Colonel Hayes said, Sergeant Brooks, listen carefully. Do not touch the document unless medical necessity requires movement. Do not surrender your recording. Tell any witness with video to preserve it immediately. Federal personnel are being notified. This scene is no longer a local matter. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. Not in relief, but in recognition. The storm had found its direction. He opened them and looked at Travis Cole, who was still trying to build a report out of fragments and fear. Yes. Colonel, Daniel said, I understand. At that exact moment, inside the annex, Naomi Price received a call from a secure line and stood so quickly her chair rolled back against the wall. Upstairs, the empty seat reserved for Marcus Ellison was no longer an absence. It was an alarm. Outside, The ambulance lights joined the police lights, washing the courthouse in white and red. While Marcus turned his head slightly toward Daniel, their eyes met across the chaos. Daniel gave one small nod. Marcus did not smile. He simply closed his eyes for a breath. As if one part of his duty had been handed safely to another soldier, Travis Cole had not understood it yet. He still thought he was managing a scene. He still thought a badge, a report, and a loud enough voice could hold back what was coming. But far beyond Fairmont, phones were ringing inside offices where his name had never mattered before and would now be impossible to forget. The ambulance doors closed on Marcus Ellison at 5:51. And, as the vehicle pulled away from the courthouse lights, the parking lot did not become calmer. It became quieter in a worse way. The kind of quiet that comes after people realize the first event is over. But the consequences have only begun. Officer Travis Cole stood near his cruiser with his jaw locked and his report forming in his head faster than his conscience could challenge it. Lieutenant Harris spoke to him in a low voice, too low for most witnesses to hear. But Daniel Brooks watched their faces and understood enough. Men trying to survive the truth often begin by agreeing on the shape of a lie. The envelope had finally been placed inside a clear evidence sleeve. Not by Travis, not by Harris, but by Mason Pike, who had refused to let anyone handle it until the county evidence technician arrived with gloves and a camera. Even then, Mason had photographed it from every angle first, because something in his gut told him that if the file vanished, every person in that parking lot would become part of a story much darker than a single officer losing control. The younger officer stood apart from everyone, staring at the ground where Marcus had fallen, his face pale beneath the rotating lights. He had joined the department to help people, or at least that was what he had told himself at graduation. Now he was watching older men decide which parts of reality were convenient. Travis walked toward the witnesses with a hard expression and a notepad in hand. "Names," he said. "Everybody who saw something. I need names." The courthouse clerk, whose name was Eleanor Whitman, looked him straight in the eye for the first time. "I already gave my statement to emergency dispatch." Travis frowned. "You will give it to me." "No," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I will give it to someone who is not involved." That sentence moved through the crowd like a match lowered toward dry paper. Travis's eyes narrowed. Before he could answer, Daniel Brooks stepped forward. "I was instructed to preserve my recording and witness statement for federal personnel." Travis turned slowly, instructed by who Daniel held the phone at his side. Screen facing inward. "Grip steady now. Colonel Rebecca Hayes, Army Inspector General Office." For the first time all evening, Travis did not speak immediately. Lieutenant Harris heard the name and looked up from his notebook. The air changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but it changed the way a room changes when someone powerful enters before they are physically there. Harris walked over to Daniel, lowering his tone into something almost polite. "Sir, you understand that local investigators will still need to review any material from the scene." Daniel met his eyes. "I understand that a federal officer told me not to surrender anything to anyone here." Harris held his gaze a second too long, then looked away. That was when the first call came into his phone. He stepped aside to answer it, turning his back to the crowd. But everyone could see his shoulders stiffen. "Yes, Chief." he said. A pause? I understand. Another pause. No. I do not know how Washington got notified that fast. Travis watched him, the color draining slowly from his confidence. Mason Pike looked down at the evidence sleeve containing the envelope and whispered, "What in God's name was he carrying?" Daniel heard him and answered quietly. Something Fairmont was not supposed to bury. At 6:11, the courthouse annex doors opened. Naomi Price came down the steps in a navy suit, federal badge clipped at her waist. Her expression calm in the way only trained anger can be calm. She was followed by 2 security officers from the Federal Review Team who had been waiting upstairs for Marcus. Naomi did not ask Travis what happened. She did not ask Harris for permission. She went straight to the evidence technician and looked at the sleeve without touching it. Her eyes scanned the markings. Then she turned to Harris, who authorized local seizure of Department of Defense restricted review material. Harris cleared his throat. "Mom, we are securing the scene." "That was not my question." Travis stepped forward, trying to reclaim the ground. He brought that document into an active police encounter. Naomi looked at him then. Really looked at him. And something in her face told Travis that his usual tone would not work here. Officer Cole, Lieutenant Colonel Ellison was scheduled to deliver that document to a federal proceeding inside this building at 6:15. You were not part of that proceeding. You were not cleared for that material. And, based on what I have already been told, you were not authorized to interfere with his arrival. Travis opened his mouth, but Harris spoke first. "We are preparing a preliminary use of force statement." Naomi turned her head slightly. "Preserve all body camera footage. Dash camera footage. Radiotraffic. Dispatch recordings. Security video. Witness contact information. And written notes from every officer present." Harris nodded too quickly. "Of course." "Do not say of course to me," Naomi said. "Sigh, yes." Federal Counsel. The words landed with the weight of a door. Harris swallowed. "Yes." Federal Counsel. At 6:24, while Marcus was being treated under guard of medical staff and military notification protocols, a black sport utility vehicle passed the county line, followed by another. Then a third. They moved without sirens, without drama, without the theatrical urgency Travis understood. That made them more frightening. Inside the lead vehicle, Colonel Rebecca Hayes sat with a tablet on her lap, reviewing the first still images sent from the courthouse camera. Marcus with both hands visible. Marcus stopped in place. Travis near the envelope. The moment before the sound that changed everything. Rebecca did not blink. She had known Marcus Ellison for 9 years. She had seen him brief generals who tried to interrupt him and watched those same generals fall silent because his facts left no room for ego. He was not reckless. He was not careless. He was not a man who misunderstood orders. If Marcus had warned an officer not to touch a file, there had been a reason. Her aide in the passenger seat turned around and said, "Local chief is requesting direct coordination before arrival." Rebecca kept her eyes on the screen. "He will receive direct coordination when I am standing in front of him." "Yes." "Colonel." She swiped to the next image. A close frame of Travis Cole's boot near the envelope. "And notify the Department of Justice liaison." She said, "This may be larger than interference, Back at the parking lot, Travis saw the headlights first. 3 dark vehicles turning onto Mercer Street in a clean line. No hesitation. No confusion. As if the town already belonged to the authority inside them. The witnesses turned. The officers turned. Harris lowered his phone. Daniel Brooks stood a little straighter without realizing it. The vehicles stopped at the edge of the lot, and the doors opened almost at once. Colonel Rebecca Hayes stepped out in dress uniform beneath the courthouse lights. Silver hair pinned neatly. Eyes steady. Face unreadable. No one spoke as she crossed the pavement. She did not look at Travis first. She looked at the evidence, sleeve. Then at Daniel. Then at the camera above the annex door. Only then did she turn to Officer Cole. Her voice was quiet enough that everyone leaned in to hear it. From this moment forward, this scene is under federal review. Travis tried to answer, but no words came out quickly enough. Rebecca held his gaze. And Officer Cole, before you say anything else, understand this clearly. Lieutenant Colonel Ellison was not alone when you stopped him. You just could not see who was standing behind him yet. Colonel Rebecca Hayes did not raise her voice. And that was what made the parking lot fall completely silent. Loud people announce power because they are afraid no one will recognize it. Rebecca carried hers like gravity. She stood beneath the courthouse lights with 2 federal investigators behind her. Her dress uniform crisp. Her expression steady. And the entire scene seemed to rearrange itself around her without a single shouted command. Travis Cole tried to recover first. Colonel, this is still a local police matter, he said. But the words came out thinner than he intended. Rebecca looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a damaged instrument. Not with anger, but with assessment. No. Officer Cole, she said. It stopped being only local the moment a Department of Defense restricted file was interfered with, and a United States Army Lieutenant Colonel was prevented from attending a federal proceeding. Travis glanced toward Lieutenant Harris, hoping for support. But Harris had gone pale and careful. Men who survive inside systems know when a stronger system has entered the room. Naomi Price stepped beside Rebecca and handed her a tablet. We have courthouse video. At least 2 civilian recordings. Dispatch audio. And the preliminary medical confirmation. Lieutenant Colonel Ellison is stable and conscious. Rebecca's face shifted only slightly at that last sentence. But Daniel Brooks saw it. Relief. Controlled before it could become visible. She turned to Daniel. Sergeant Brooks. Daniel straightened. Colonel, you preserved your recording, yes. Colonel. Good. Do not release it publicly. Federal investigators will duplicate it with your consent and maintain chain of custody. Understood. Travis heard the words chain of custody and looked toward the envelope. Now sealed inside the clear sleeve on the evidence table, the technician had set up near the cruiser. He finally understood that the file was not just paper, it was a key. Rebecca walked to the sleeve and read the markings without touching it. Then she turned to Harris. Who handled this document? Harris hesitated. The evidence technician placed it in the sleeve. Before that, Mason Pike stepped forward before Harris could shape the answer. His voice was rough but honest. No one handled it. Colonel. It fell near Officer Cole. I stood between him and the document until the technician arrived. Rebecca looked at him. You documented that, Mason nodded. Photographs from several angles? Preserve them. Yes. Ma'am. Travis's jaw tightened. This is getting blown out of proportion. The sentence was a mistake. The second it left his mouth, every witness seemed to hear it. Eleanor Whitman. The courthouse clerk looked at him as if he had just confirmed something she had feared for years. The teenager lowered his phone slightly. Not because he stopped recording, but because even he understood the officer had moved from denial into contempt. Rebecca turned back to Travis. A man is in the hospital. A federal proceeding was disrupted. Restricted material connected to an active review was nearly compromised. Multiple witnesses report that your statements at the scene do not match what they observed. Tell me which part you believe is out of proportion. Travis opened his mouth, closed it, then tried another route. He refused my lawful commands. What was the lawful basis for the stop suspicious behavior? Define it. He was near county property with sealed documents. He was scheduled to enter county property for a federal review. I did not know that. You had his identification. It looked questionable. Did you verify it? Travis said nothing. The silence did what questioning sometimes cannot. It exposed the missing step. Rebecca let it breathe. Then she looked at the younger officer. Did anyone request verification through military or federal channels before escalation? The young officer swallowed. His eyes flicked to Travis. Then away. I suggested we call it in. Travis turned sharply. Watch what you say. Rebecca stepped in immediately. Calm and absolute. Officer Cole, you will not intimidate a witness in front of federal investigators. The sentence landed like a gavel. Travis went still. For the first time all evening, he looked less like a man in control and more like a man realizing how many doors had closed behind him. One of Rebecca's investigators moved toward Lieutenant Harris with a document folder. Lieutenant, we are issuing a preservation order for all relevant records, including personnel files, internal complaints, body camera, metadata, radio logs, vehicle location records, incident reports, and prior complaints involving Officer Cole. Harris blinked. Prior complaints, Naomi Price answered. The file Lieutenant Colonel Ellison was carrying concerns more than tonight. That was the moment the parking lot changed again. Not because people were shocked that there had been complaints, but because many of them were not shocked at all. Eleanor Whitman closed her eyes briefly, remembering a cousin who had filed one. Daniel Brooks looked toward the ground, remembering stories traded quietly at veterans' meetings. Mason Pike stared at Travis with something like betrayal growing across his face. Travis tried to laugh, but there was no humor left in him. You were going to dig through my whole career because of one misunderstanding. Rebecca's eyes did not move. No, we are going to dig because Lieutenant Colonel Ellison was on his way to deliver evidence, suggesting this was never just one misunderstanding. The words struck harder than accusation because they were not emotional. They were procedural. They were already happening. At 6:58, Travis Cole was relieved of field duty pending federal and departmental investigation. His badge and service weapon were secured according to policy, without spectacle, without roughness, without the cruelty he had shown others. That was the difference. Accountability did not need to imitate abuse to defeat it. It only needed witnesses, records, and the courage to stop protecting the wrong man. As Mason Pike escorted Travis away from the center of the scene, Travis looked once toward Daniel Brooks, then toward the teenager with the phone, then toward the evidence sleeve that had become the beginning of his undoing. He seemed to want someone to look afraid. No one did. Across town, in a quiet hospital room, Marcus Ellison opened his eyes as Colonel Hayes entered. She stood beside his bed. No cameras. No crowd. No performance. "The file is secure," she said. Marcus exhaled slowly. The witnesses protected. The hearing, Rebecca's voice softened by 1 degree. Delayed, not buried. Marcus turned his eyes toward the window, where the courthouse lights were just visible beyond the roofs of Fairmont. "Good," he said. Then tonight was not wasted. Rebecca studied him for a moment. The soldier who had nearly been erased on the way to telling the truth, and she understood what he meant. This had never been only about what happened to him. It was about every report dismissed, every complaint softened, every person told they must have misunderstood their own humiliation. Outside, Fairmont continued under the same cold sky. But something beneath it had shifted. A badge had spoken loudly. A file had answered quietly. And for the first time in years, the quiet voice was louder. By morning, Fairmont looked almost unchanged. And that was the unsettling part. The courthouse still opened at 8. The coffee shop still poured dark roast into paper cups. Cars still rolled past the flagpole. And people still walked quickly across the square with their collars turned against the cold. But beneath that ordinary rhythm, something had cracked. News of the Federal Review moved through town in whispers first. Then statements. Then official notices posted where silence used to live. Officer Travis Cole was no longer on patrol. Lieutenant Harris had been placed under administrative review. Old complaints, the ones people had been told were misunderstandings, incomplete, or impossible to prove, were being pulled from storage and read by people who did not owe Fairmont favors. Eleanor Whitman gave her statement twice and did not change a word. The teenager's video was copied, sealed, and protected. Mason Pike turned over his photographs and every note he had written that night. Daniel Brooks sat for a formal interview with Colonel Rebecca Hayes. And when she thanked him for preserving the record, he said only, "That is what he told me to do." 3 days later, Marcus Ellison returned to the courthouse annex, moving slower than before but standing just as straight. No crowd gathered around him. No one clapped. That would have made the moment too simple. Real justice rarely arrives like thunder. Sometimes it walks in quietly, wearing a dark coat, carrying the same truth people once tried to stop. Inside the hearing room, the sealed file was opened under federal supervision. Names were read. Dates were matched. Missing reports were found. Video logs were recovered. The story widened beyond one parking lot, beyond one officer, beyond one evening, under red and blue lights. Families who had been ignored were contacted again. Witnesses who had been dismissed were finally heard. And every time someone tried to call it an isolated mistake, the record answered with pattern. Marcus did not speak much during the proceedings. He did not need to. The files spoke. The cameras spoke. The witnesses spoke. When he was finally asked if he wanted to make a statement, he stood slowly, placed both hands on the table, and looked around the room with the same calm that had unsettled Travis Cole from the beginning. "I was fortunate," he said, "not because of what happened to me, but because people knew who to call, because a camera was recording, because witnesses stayed, because my rank forced doors to open." He paused, and the room became still. "But the question Fairmont has to answer is not what happened to me. The question is, how many people stood where I stood without a title, without a file, without Washington coming behind them?" No one answered. There was no answer that would not sound like shame. Outside, the flag moved gently above the courthouse steps. The same flag Marcus had passed as a boy, as a soldier, and as a man nearly erased by someone who mistook prejudice for instinct. Travis Cole had believed the badge made him untouchable. He had believed fear could be written into a report and called truth. But truth is patient. It waits in envelopes. It waits in cameras. It waits in the memories of people brave enough to say what they saw. And when it finally stands up, even the loudest lie has to lower its voice. Marcus Ellison left Fairmont that afternoon without raising a fist, without asking for revenge, without needing the town to cheer. He had carried the truth into the place that tried to stop him. And this time, the truth did not leave alone.